You know what that song means. It means it's time for Leadership 813, Leadership Styles. These are the Week 2 assignments. And we're going to be dealing with kind of moving from a more general perspective on leadership style to a specific leadership style called transformational leadership. And I would say out of all the leadership styles, most students are most familiar, or most of them have heard of transformational leadership. And consequently, many think that's the only style of leadership that's worth even studying. But we will find during the course of this class that it is just one of several styles and certainly one of many theories. But we're going to start with this one. And also you may know that the primary author was Bernard Bass and also Burns, but some of the ideas were traced back to earlier people. So I think what we'll be doing, as we normally do, is try to trace the history of this. What did it evolve out of? And also kind of where does it go from where it is right now? And how does it compare to other leadership styles that we'll be studying and what we've learned from the first week of class? Okay, so we have our assigned readings. Some of them are from Bass himself, and other ones are perspectives from other people. The assignment for this week, again, we're going to continue on with our discussion. And as I normally say, I build these classes around kind of a comprehensive perspective. We start out with one, but we don't totally change subjects. The subject in week 2 is certainly related to the subject in week 1, and there should be an ability to kind of tie things together as we move forward. The first weeks of discussion I thought was very good. The initial posts were strong. Everybody got in on time. The follow-up posts were good. You've picked specific things to talk about. The one thing I would mention, and this was my fault, I take full credit for it, please use a beginning thread, start an initial thread when you do your first post. It's very difficult for me, and I assume for everybody else, to kind of follow the discussion that's going on when the post is falling all on one particular thread. You can't tie things together, and you don't know which particular part of the post somebody is even commenting on. So again, start with a new thread with your initial post, and I think everything will work out just fine. So the discussion is going to be in regards to transformational leadership and how it ties into other leadership theories that we talked about last week. And what I'd like to talk about next is the week 3 paper, because this is going to be, again, more of a reflection of the first 3 weeks of work and readings and how you're going to try to tie this all together. So the topic is going to be the development of transactional and transformational leadership theories in the context of overall leadership styles. Okay, so you're going to be kind of bringing everything together. Now you'll notice there's not a real specific question that you have to answer, so you have to develop what it is out of this that you want to really present, what you want to talk about, which of all the different things you could talk about, what are you going to present from these readings? And I would make another comment. When we talk about transactional and transformational leadership, there have been millions of articles written about them. So you have to be fairly specific about what you want to talk about. And this is, again, the key to becoming, choosing a dissertation topic out of the millions of things that could be written about. You've got to pick the one thing that you can and do want to write about. Okay, so this is kind of preparation for that. So I'll be talking about it more in next week's video, but it's an 8 to 10 page paper, and as usual, doesn't include the title page, doesn't include the references in the 8 to 10 pages. And I'll be talking more about the specifications. In the Start Here section, I've posted a couple of other videos related to peer-reviewed journal articles and scholarly writing. If you've taken other classes from me recently, you may have looked at these. It may be a good time to review them again, but they're posted in the Start Here section of the class. To review the keys to academic writing. Now, writing and interpretation of people's writing is somewhat subjective, of course, and every professor, every instructor has their own particular take on it. My particular take is somewhat influential because since I'm the dissertation advisor to many students, especially who go into leadership, and a chair of many of the committees of students who go into leadership, I'm looking for specific things. So it's a good idea to kind of begin to understand what I'm looking for. So you're always going to be using academic literature to build the foundation of your position, and that's what we're practicing doing both in our discussions and our paper writing in the classes. You need to read a lot and then synthesize, take a little bit out of what you've read and synthesize it and compare it to what other authors and what other theories are saying. So you essentially build your position and what you think about something out of the ideas of others. At this stage, since you're not out there collecting data and coming up with your own theories, the originality is going to be the way you combine the ideas of the experts or the authorities in the particular field. So as we look at the various styles of leadership, we'll be trying to compare and contrast. What are they trying to get at that's different from what we had before? How does this theory or this approach differ and improve what was there before? Okay. Using your references effectively is always a key to successful writing. And one final thing is we don't use direct quotes very much unless there's no better way to say it. Use the journal articles that we're reading for the class as examples of the way we want you to write. Okay? And you won't see many direct quotes. You'll see a lot of references, especially in the literature section of the paper, and that's the way you should be writing. Now, some of you have seen this because I found that to help students more effectively and to use my time more effectively, that a guide or a rubric would be useful as a way of developing students' writing skills. And now, I know some of the other classes are using a different paper rubric, but I developed this because this is the way that I find, suits my style, let's say, of development, of guidance when I try to help people work with their papers and work with their topics. Okay. So this is what the rubric looks like. This is the first couple of areas that I look at. So when I get a paper, first thing I do is I run through the quantitative requirements. Is it the right page length? Does it have an adequate number of references for the topic that we're dealing with? Is the paper basically on topic? Are you writing something within the area that the assignment is? And is it turned in on time? I get some very interesting papers turned in and maybe even very well written, but they're not on the topic that the assignment was. So many times I'll just send those back and say, well, now write one like this, but write it about the topic that you're supposed to be writing about. Is the paper in a proper form and structure? And by that I mean every paper should have an introduction. Every paper should have a body with sections and subsections with headings that indicate what the main idea of that particular section is. Every paper should have a conclusion. When I first started, I got papers that were 8 pages that started with one sentence and had no breaks through the entire 8 pages and no idea what the topic was supposed to be. So the introduction, the purpose of it is to define the topic, to introduce your thesis statement, what your paper is going to be about, try to motivate it, why it's important to read this particular paper, and then lay out a basic outline or description about how you're going to handle the topic. Then when you move into the body, that should have a heading indicating what the main ideas are and subheadings within the main sections that then indicate the ideas that support sub-ideas that support the main ideas, and then the conclusion wraps things up. Well, the next part deals with the mechanics, and here again we're just looking at the paper from a standpoint of how does it look. Does it have spelling errors? Does it have grammar errors? What about punctuation? Is it using jargon which doesn't belong there? Are words being used correctly? Are we writing in a formal style, or are we too conversational, too relaxed? So these again are just issues that need to be fixed. I shouldn't get papers with a squiggly red line underneath it indicating that you haven't even corrected the spelling yet. There should never be a problem with using a singular verb with a plural subject. So they're just things that I will mark, but I'm not here to do proofreading on your papers. That should be done ahead of time. Again, so I'll mark a few of them, and I'll just may say, this just needs to be improved. It's hard to judge the quality of a paper when the mechanics are bad. Okay, no matter how good the ideas are. Another area that's important that students many times haven't focused on that much are use of transitions. Remember, the paper is going to be set up as a set of sections. There's going to be an introduction section, and there's going to be the body, and within the body there are going to be major sections and minor sections, each with headings. Well, that helps. I mean, that certainly structures it so you can see what's going on, but you have to tie the ideas within those sections together so that the logic flows from one thing to another. I mean, you might have 2 or 3 great ideas in the paper, but if you don't show the logic that connects them together, what they mean to the overall thesis of the paper, you're placing the burden on the reader, and the reader should not have to try to figure out how your ideas connect together. You should work very hard to make your ideas clear and connect together and lead to a logical conclusion. Now, this sometimes is a problem even in the peer-reviewed journal articles, because you'll find not all of them are well written. You'll find that it's very difficult to follow some of them because authors haven't written enough transition between the main ideas that shows how they're connected together. Okay? Well, the same thing is true when I pick up papers and I can't figure out the logic. I can see the ideas, but I can't see the logic between the ideas. So this is something we're going to need to work on. Number 5 is starting to get into what we would call quality. It's not how it's written, it's not the mechanics, it's, what about the ideas themselves, and how well do the ideas support the thesis statement. So you begin with the thesis statement. The thesis statement says, my paper is going to show that blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is you're going to show with your paper. And it has to be fairly specific. Okay? So you're not just saying, well, I'm going to talk about all the literature, and here's one paper, and here's what this paper said, and here's another paper, here's what this paper said. That is not doing anything. That's simply giving me a literature, it's not even a literature review, it's really a kind of a book report about the various articles, and that's not where we're going. So even though that may be how you interpret the assignment, it's not how I'm intending the assignment, because you need to pick something out of the general category of the assignment, the general topic of the assignment, that you say, well, out of all the things I could possibly write about, this is what I'm going to write about. And here's how I'm going to show how this literature that we've been covering for the past 3 weeks proves this particular statement or shows this particular thing. Okay, so it's going to be something of a little bit of a transition for you to be able to develop this style of writing. It's what we call an argumentative writing style, where you take a particular position, okay, and then the paper backs up that position, shows why that's the correct position. So moving on, creativity and originality are important, because that's what's going to be required when you work on your dissertation. You're going to have to find something that's original to be able to work on. Okay. At this stage, you're not going out and expecting to collect data to prove a particular point. Okay. Your creativity is going to be expressed in how you interpret the literature that you're reviewing, that we're reading about, that we're discussing it. And here again, I would kind of recommend use the basis of the discussions, which so far have been very good, as a way of informing your ideas in your paper. Okay, your fellow students' ideas are perfectly valid to be able to use in the paper. So if you see something that's a great discussion point that maybe you hadn't thought of, okay, give it credit, but introduce it into your paper. So the main creativity you're going to show is how you use the work of others to develop your own idea. And this is the essence of coming up with your dissertation topic. Bloom's taxonomy I've referred to in other classes, so I won't go into it specifically here, but the idea is by simply describing something, you're showing a low level of understanding, but as you're able to integrate, analyze, synthesize, evaluate, you're showing a stronger and more fully developed learning of the particular topic. So that's where we're going. We're trying to show synthesis of the material, not simply a description of the material. And once you can do that, you'll be considered brilliant. So in our paper for week 3, we're going to be looking at transactional and transformational leadership styles. And out of this, you'll find that there's millions of articles that have been written, and consequently, you're going to have to pick something fairly specific to work on so that you can weave together a story, build your case that your particular idea about these leadership styles is actually true, is actually a valid point. It's a point of makes your paper worthwhile. And finally, everybody starts at a different point with their writing, but everybody should show improvement so that by the time we get to week 7 paper or week 8, you should see a definite improvement, and I should see a definite improvement from your very first paper. So the keys to success, and this is just pretty much a summary of what I've been talking about, is you're going to be using the literature, synthesizing what has been said, not reviewing, not writing a review of each of the articles, but pulling out the main ideas and comparing and contrasting and integrating them, bigger word, synthesizing them, to come up with your own conclusions, your own definitions, your own point based upon what the experts have said. Just like a lawyer, the more evidence you can add, the stronger your case is going to be. So to finish up, for this week, we have the Leadership Cartoon of the Week. And as we're aware, Dilbert has a particular perspective on all these topics that may not coincide exactly with what the academic literature is, but more than most of us have experienced the Dilbert point of view at one point or another in our lives. So until next time, goodbye and good luck.